Ladies and gentlemen, my job this morning essentially is to try and give you some food for thought, to help you think about some of the issues that you can discuss in the various thematic areas that you see that have been put on your table. And as has been highlighted by the Permanent Secretary, you can move around in the different groups and make your suggestions and what do you think should be some of the way forward in respect of those specific areas. And indeed, you can make some general comments. What will actually happen, which I'm sure the PS will tell you later on about, is we will break off and then we'll have lunch, or if we finish off before that, we can then come into the presentations from the various thematic groups that you do have. We had a similar session in Tatamboa High School, and we are here this morning. I wanted to just highlight some of the key government policy areas that we are focused on. As you know that we delivered the budget last in November for this year. The financial year this year will be much shorter because we have, following a long-term assessment, have decided to change our financial year. And the financial year will be from August of this year till the end of July next year. So our budget now will be running into 2 calendar years, half of each of the calendar year, the preceding year and the following year. As they have in many countries, for example, New Zealand recently moved their calendar year from 1st of April to the 31st of March to 1st of July to 30th of June. They started following the Australian system. There's also those of you who would have heard the proceedings in Parliament yesterday. At the end of it all, the Honourable Speaker also announced that the budget will be delivered on the 22nd of June. And again, for the first time, we'll be delivering the budget in the evening. The budget will be delivered at 7:30 p.m. So those, you can all sit back and have your dinner and watch the budget, and hopefully not choke on the food. But also, on the other hand, it will give people the opportunity to be able to ensure that we don't have the shenanigans that we normally have, because tariff, as you know, once announced, comes into effect almost immediately. So normally when we have had budgets announced at 10 a.m., the tariff, in fact, has a retrospective application because it comes into effect at midnight, a few hours before 10 o'clock. In this way, what will happen is that once we announce the budget in the evening, the tariff then becomes applicable from midnight that night, in other words, technically the next day. So FERCA does not have all those issues. It also gives the opportunity to have a longer lockdown period, as they say, because normally, some of you may not know this, is that before the Minister for Finance delivers the budget, you have about 2 or 3 hours before that, you have some journalists and some accounting firms that are given access to the budget. And they are locked in a room, they can't come out, they can't communicate with anybody until the budget announcement is complete. So the idea being is that they get to analyze the budget and hopefully write stories and understand and give opinion to their client, and a lot more informed. And now, of course, some media organizations are not very good at that. Others are a lot better than others. So this time we hope to have a longer lockdown period. So we hope to probably have a lockdown period from 2 o'clock in the afternoon all the way till 7. And we want to be able to give briefings to them in between if they have any questions, so we get better analysis of the budget when it's announced. Ladies and gentlemen, in the last year's budget, we had 2 key major initiative announcements that we made, which is a long-term issue and which is also an issue in particular for both of them that we need to address almost immediately. They're not necessarily directly connected to economic growth per se, although one could argue it would happen in the long term, but that is in the area of home ownership and also in the area of improving medical services. We have a very low rate of home ownership in Fiji. A country like Singapore has a home ownership rate of 93%. In other words, 93% of Singaporeans own their own home. They have a title to their home. Whether it is a flat in a strata title system, or whether it is a freestanding house on a block of land. But in Singapore, as you know, it's mainly strata title. And in Fiji, that is also an option. Some of you may know that about 3-4 years ago, government had changed the law pertaining to strata titling. So strata titling, for those of you who may not be aware, say if this is a building, we can make this, say, maybe into 2 flats. And then you can buy on a flat. And you have a title to the flat, whether it's through lease land or whether it's through freehold land. You can then use that title as collateral in a bank. The bank sees it as a standalone title, even though there may be apartments upstairs on top of it. At the moment, our idea of home ownership is that you have to have one house on one block of land. Now, the development cost of that is actually quite exorbitant, and I'm predominantly talking about a place like Viti Levu. If you look at Suva Peninsula at the moment, there's no land in Suva Peninsula. People are now going out as far as Missouri and further beyond, so they should travel to work every day. They simply cannot afford the housing in the Suva Peninsula. And this is one of the reasons why we brought about this particular law where we restricted foreign ownership of residential properties in municipal areas. And we've also said this is why foreign ownership needs to be restricted, also even outside municipal areas. If they do buy Fijian, what we call dirt or land or soil, they must build within 2 years. Because if you want to buy land in Fiji or lease land in Fiji, or in particular for freehold land, you must show a commitment to the country. You cannot be simply speculating. South is a clear case of that, where there has been widespread speculation, and the property prices in those areas are beyond even the dreams of most Fijians. So that really is an issue. So strata titling, ladies and gentlemen, is something that we are focused on. You would have seen at least in the Fiji Sun about a week ago, that we had set aside $10 million to help Itauke landowners develop their own land. Generally, we've seen the trend in Fiji is that there's a saying that most Itauke landowners are asset rich but cash poor. So they have a lot of assets, they own 91% of the land, but they don't have much disposable income in their pocket, given the fact they own so much assets. So, and as we've also seen, that a lot of the development that's taken place on Itauke land, the subdivisions, etc., it's not actually done by them. It's done by other people who simply come and maybe, say, lease 50 acres of land. They pay them a very basic lease rental, and then they go off and develop it. They put the roads, the water, the electricity, the various connectivities to other utilities, and then they're able to, in some cases, in Viti Levu, sell those leased land for 99-year leases for 100,000, 200, 250,000, even more now. So the cream does not go to the landowner. We want the cream to go to the landowners also. You see there's 4 projects that we've already started on. At the moment they're all in the Western Division. We've got hopefully one starting in 2 weeks in Suva in the Central Division. But there are 2 purposes for that. One, obviously I've just stated, is to be able to empower them, to give them the ability to have access to the cash. But secondly, to also demonstrate that leasing of land is a good proposition. It can be a good business. So please get into it, make more land available. The third thing is, of course, those people who don't have access to the land at the moment are able to access that land. So they'll feel secure, they'll want to invest, they get a secure title. Many places in Fiji we see a lot of Bakavanua arrangements. Vast tracts of land in, outside Nandi, Lotoka, Ba. Some people have been living there for 50 years. They're paying landowners, $20 a month or $30. The fact, I was in Lovu just 2 weeks ago. People have been living there for 50 years. They're 4 brother landowners, they come and collect, like $1,000 a month. And this is only about 15 minutes away from Latoka town. It's prime land. So these are the kind of things that we're trying to unlock. The second area, of course, is medical facilities. We do not have full tertiary care, as we always say, that if any one of us in this room, God forbid, has a heart attack at the moment, there's nobody that can do open heart surgery on you in Fiji. Nobody. There's nobody available. That is not a good situation to be in. The rich people can afford what we call, they get a private jet. I really on a daily basis now approve that as Minister of Civil Aviation. When you have any emergency flights coming in, I have to approve that. And we do that normally on a daily basis now because tourists and various locals are flying out overseas because they need medical treatment. If you have enough time, maybe you've got enough time to fly to India and get a surgery done very well, but at a very, affordable price. And they do it quite well. So we want to be able to improve the position of our medical services and medical facilities. A lot of these issues, of course, ladies and gentlemen, are legacy issues. You can't get a person out of Fiji School of Medicine and 2 years later they cut you open and do open heart surgery. It takes about 10, 15, 20 years of training and experience, both onshore and offshore. It's a legacy issue. You can't churn these doctors out, overnight. So unfortunately, because of the lack of investment in the human capital and human resources in our medical facilities and a planned approach, we are paying the price today. So we have started a program and we're building on that, but we see the opportunity for the private sector to invest in these areas too. This is why we have offered very healthy tax packages. You can get up to about a 12-year holiday if you invest in medical facilities. Even basic things like if you invest in somebody comes and sets up a center over here, without it being a hospital, they buy an X-ray machine, MRI machine, scanners, etc. It's a minimum investment of $2 million. They'll get a 7-year tax holiday because you don't have an MRI machine. We'd rather not you pay the tax, but we'd rather you provide the service to the people. So it needs to be a service-oriented, policy. Similarly, if you build affordable housing and it's government-approved, cyclone-certified, earthquake, etc., then you can also get up to about a 12-year holiday in that area. But overall, let me also talk about, I'd like to very quickly touch upon debt. There's been a lot of, suddenly people in Fiji, I think probably because of political reasons, they keep on talking about debt. They have absolutely no idea about debt. As you said, the policy should always be that you only borrow money to build something. You don't borrow money to spend on your day-to-day living. So you would not go to the bank here in Labasa and borrow money to have a party at Chicken Express. You'd borrow money to build an extension to your house, or you want to build something else, that you can say will be there for a few years to come. So as the Deputy Governor highlighted in the expenditure mix that we have of government, we are spending more of our budget now in capital investment than in operational. So we raise enough revenue from taxes, etc., even though we've decreased the income tax for companies from, used to be about 33% only a few years ago, today it is 20%. Before, if you earned more than $8,600 only a few years ago, you had to pay taxes. Now, you don't pay taxes unless you earn more than $16,000. And before, the first bracket of tax, when you earn more than $8,600, you started off at paying 15%. Today, when you start paying taxes over $16,000, it starts off at 7%. In fact, when we brought about these tax measures, government took a direct loss of revenue of $54 million that year. But we saw what it can do for the future. And indeed, we are reaping the benefits of that now. So economic policies, ladies and gentlemen, aren't just there for the next year. You have to have a vision. You have to know what will be the effect of it in 3, 4, 5, 10 years' time. And that's precisely why the economy is doing well. One of the reasons is because when you decrease income tax, people have a lot more money in their pocket. I remember immediately after the income tax was reduced, I used to go to various businesses. I normally used to take a walk around. People at Chicken Express say, oh, my chicken finishes by 3 p.m. I don't know where these people are getting their money from. It's because they have more money in their pocket to spend. Similarly with things like, free medicine, education, subsidized electricity, people again have more money to spend. And I want to tell all the business people here today, we helped you to give your employees a pay rise without you having to pay for it. And a lot of businesses don't appreciate that fact. Because suddenly the person who you were paying $12,000 a year no longer pays taxes, so they have more money in their pocket, so they feel better working for you. This is the reality Which brings me to my other point, many businesses in Fiji still aren't doing the right thing. Notwithstanding the fact that income tax has been reduced in Fiji to 20%. Notwithstanding the fact that we've reduced income tax threshold for individual employees of theirs. We still have, I'm not saying all businesses do this, we still have a lot of businesses who what we call want to make a kill on each sale. Second-hand car dealers. We have seen the landed cost of a second-hand car in Fiji. And the markup on those cars are phenomenal. About 100% some of them 150%. We have bus chassis that there's no duty on them. But the person selling the bus chassis in Fiji has a markup of more than 100%. Now that does not all go well. It used to happen in the tourism industry before. Those of you who may have lived in Vitilevu, I remember only a few years ago, you walk into a shop in Nandi town, they'll have a bulla shirt that says $65. So one day I walked in, there was a nice bulla shirt, and I said to him, I said, how much? He said, oh, for you, $20. And I said, why? He said, no, that's the tourist price. So somebody else walked in after me, and he obviously sending to me $20 because maybe I'm a minister. But the other local guy who walked in, he was selling to me for $25. So even at $25, he's making a profit. Now what I said to him, I said, if you sold it at the same price to everybody, the tourists will probably buy 5 pieces. And indeed, that is precisely what has happened in the garment industry, in the tourism sector. If you go to Nandi, you go to Port Denrau, which is one of the most expensive tourism locations on mainland Vitilevu, you will find t-shirts being sold for $19. So if you and I walk in, we'll buy it at $19. The tourists who come from the USA will buy it at $19. So that has happened, but we need it to happen in other areas. And I think we have a plea to the business community. Please ensure you do that. This is why, unfortunately, because of the fact that government, for example, there's no duty on outboard motor engines. Why did we do that? Because you know people who live in the Maritime Islands, or people you know who may live in a remote part of northern Vanuatu may need to come by boat because there's no road. We want them to be able to have outboard engine. But the markups of these things are very high. This is why there was a law introduced last year when we presented the budget that said that if you do not pass on the duty reduction, and if you do not pass on, or if you do not pass on the VAT reduction, it's an offense. 32 companies have been issued with penalty notices. They've all paid except 3, right? 3 of them want to take us to court, but all the other 29 have paid. And the fines have ranged from $10,000 to $50,000. So we hope to inculcate a culture where people don't do that. We don't like to do price control, because price control is a very inefficient way of trying to monitor people. You need thousands of people literally to go and check everybody's books every time. But the reality is also there's a lot of businesses who are doing the right thing. There are a lot of businesses, as the Deputy Governor has highlighted, who are investing. But the reality also is as Mr. Chut highlighted, there are some businesses who feel they do not necessarily get the same access to credit and various other facilities as perhaps others in Vitilevu do access that. And that is one of the reasons why we are here today, to help get feedback from you, but also some positive contribution from you in respect of what we can do better, how we can do it. In respect of small to medium enterprises, at the moment we recognize that there is an issue with that because we have a number of different agencies providing the services. You know, the Honourable Prime Minister was here some months back with the Minister of Industry and Trade, where we were giving this $1,000 grant to people, who already maybe say selling handicraft or selling vegetables or what have you, and we actually encouraging them to get into that area, give them more seed funding. So that's industry and trade. Then we have NextNet, then we have Northern Development Program, then we have, FGD maybe doing something. What we want to do is bring it all under one umbrella. The Malaysians have done it quite well. We had a meeting last week, a week before last, with the Deputy Governor and the Governor of the Reserve Bank of Fiji, and we are meeting next week to come up with a legal framework as to how we can have one one direction, one regulatory framework, and have a very good board with private sector on it. And this particular institution, whatever it will be called, will not only provide financing or facilitate financing or access to financing, but also do mentoring, incubation of businesses, monitoring, all those types of things need to be done. Now, as was highlighted by the pastor, that there are a lot of people who are trained. In Fiji, we have a very different way of looking at things. We think that most people who leave school, who attend training, should be going out and looking for a job. One of the former presidents of India said, our youth should not be job seekers, our youth also need to be job creators. There are many young people, I'm sure the pastor has come across, who are quite creative, who may have new ideas. We want to nurture that. And that is the reality of what this framework can also do. We have some very bright people. You should be proud. This M-Pesa that you're using was developed by somebody from Bangalore. You may not know this. But he used the Kenyan model and then reconfigured it. And you've come today, you have M-Pesa. And some young man from Labasa, I forget his name, who did that. So there's a lot of opportunities in that respect also, and we want to harness that. The other issue, ladies and gentlemen, that I do want to very briefly talk about is, it's okay to talk about growth. We are particularly concerned about any inequality that stems from any economic growth. Those countries that the Deputy Governor highlighted, China, India, Australia, New Zealand. There's a recent study by IMF that was done because for decades the World Bank was accused of only being quite elitist in its approach. So they now measure countries to see whether the inequality between the haves and the have-nots has increased or decreased. I'm happy to announce Fiji was only one of the 4 countries in the Asia-Pacific region where inequality has actually decreased. In all those other countries, inequality has actually grown. In other words, the gap between the rich and poor has become more significant. So, social policy measures like free education, water, electricity, does help reduce that gap. Because inequality also is your ability to access various services. So imagine if education was not completely free, many of the kids who are in high school today, they won't be in high school. So invariably, they will end up getting jobs that does not pay well. But the moment they're able to get a university degree or maybe attend one of the technical colleges and say maybe do plumbing, the rates become quite significant. So the inequality actually decreases. So we are very concerned and we want to keep an eye on it and we will constantly monitor that to be able to constantly reduce the inequality gap between our citizens. Debt, as I was mentioning, ladies and gentlemen, in Fiji as a proportion to GDP. What is GDP? Everybody talks about GDP. Right? In put in simple terms, GDP is the total value of goods and services our country produces. So, our total value of our goods and services is approximately $9 billion. $9.8 billion. That's the amount of goods and services we produce, the value of our goods and services. Obviously, the bigger it is, the better it is for us. This is why productivity is also very important. This is why I keep on, when we talk to employee organizations and trade unions, we need to be able to also say to them, it's not just simply about pay rates, it's also about productivity levels. And talking about productivity levels, we need to be mindful, what are the things that affects a person's ability to be productive at work? As I said in Natambua last week, and I've said in various other tourism forums, majority of the people who work in the hotels, who serve your food, who clean your toilet, who make your bed, who clean your room are women. Majority, maybe 95% in all the hotels. If they are being bashed up the night before at home, what do you think their levels of productivity would be the next day? Same way, if I got beaten up today in Labasa, I won't be able to do well tomorrow. If I have to go to the office, which I will go to the office, I won't be able to produce a lot better. In fact, I probably won't want to go to work. So, things like domestic violence is not a private issue, it's a public issue, it's a commercial issue, it's a financial issue. In other words, things like also, this is why we carry out the civil service reforms. To have merit-based appointments is very, very important. If all of us were applying for a job, say in the commissioner's office, but the commissioner had an unwritten rule, or maybe even a written rule, to say only people who've got blue eyes will get the job. And even though this gentleman, Mr. Pinto, is the best person for the job, he's not going to get the job because he does not have blue eyes. Justin doesn't have blue eyes. He will not get the job, but he's the best person. Now, what does that mean? It means that the commissioner's office will not be able to produce to the optimum level because he's missing out on the best person for the job. So we have to look at appointments in the civil service, appointments, you go to the private sector, in his car sales yard, in his anybody, any businessman here, the hardware store, he's going to hire the best person for the job. He must, because he wants a higher return on his profits. Similarly, a government, any private organization must hire the best person for the job. And these are some of the factors that we are looking at. This is how you also maximize your output as a country. Because that is obviously enhanced. So these kind of social issues do have a huge impact. We are at the moment, for example, as the Deputy Governor highlighted, and some of the questions also highlighted this issue. In Fiji for decades, we have not been very good at collecting data. We have not been good at collecting data. Now, in this year's budget, the 2016 budget, we had already allocated more than in excess of $1 million to Bureau of Statistics. Do more surveys, hire more people, get better statistics available. And in fact, there has been a submission made to see if we can increase it even further. The reality is, we do need to do that. So, when the Deputy Governor does stand up and says, you know, small to medium enterprises has been flourishing, we should be able to know, well, how many people in the hairdressing industry have benefited, how many people who are small vegetable farmers, how many people who are making some mop or whatever it is have benefited from it. And these are very pertinent questions, because if you do not have good data, it restricts your ability to have very targeted policy initiatives. And that is very, very critical. So that's one area that Fiji has been lapsing in, and that's one area that we have been focusing on, and we've in fact given more funding to Bureau of Statistics, and we hope that will increase even better. Again, also the issue about the informal sector, that's not captured, because the RBF, in fact, we have a problem with the RBF statistics. They're only looking at measuring employment rates of the opportunities only through the Fiji Times, because they need to, we've asked them to look at other mediums also, not just Fiji Sun, but some people now only advertise online, as you know. You know, you only can get those jobs advertised on the internet. So these are the areas that they do need to look at to be able to give us a true measure of how much employment is being created. And hopefully in the time to come very soon, that will of course improve. There are some people, for example, we are aware of, who earn a lot more money, and I cannot say this for sure, for example, for one level, but most definitely Viti level, who have an income of about $200-300 a week in the informal sector. They sell boo, they sell pineapple, they sell whatever by the roadside. They don't pay taxes, they're not counted in the formal sector, and some of them are doing a lot better than people in paid employment. These are some of the people that aren't being captured. So your ability to also measure things like income growth rates, income accessibility becomes also limited. So we need to come up with new measurements in respect of that. Ladies and gentlemen, I think I'd like to probably close down there and maybe get you to ask some more questions. before we break up into the groups, then please feel free to ask me any question now, in respect of what we can do. The other issue that I want to very briefly highlight is manufacturing. And as the Deputy Governor highlighted, that manufacturing we see that a huge potential for manufacturing in Fiji. And the reason why the graph in the background showed that manufacturing decreases predominantly because of sugarcane production decreasing. But we have seen manufacturing output increase in other sectors within the manufacturing area. There are a number of factories being set up. We know a number of factories are currently being set up also in the Loto-Kanadi corridor in Suva, where our manufacturing base, in fact, is increasing. Of course, a place like Vanua Levu, where nearly 50% of all the leases weren't renewed, took a huge hit. It has a huge impact on your economy. There are now vast tracts of land that are vacant. Now what it has meant is that landowners aren't getting any lease payments from that. The roads aren't better, some schools have closed down, shops have closed down, so the income levels in all those areas have decreased. Unfortunately, these are kind of political decisions taken 15, 20 years ago. And this is one of the other issues that we do want to discuss, is when we talk about the economy, we need to view it objectively as opposed to from an ethnic perspective or from a political perspective per se. Because if you look at all the economies in the world, and this is what we're trying to inculcate, places like we all talk about Singapore, we talk about USA, whatever it is, they made economic decisions based on economic fundamentals, what is good for the country per se, not with ethnic consideration or other kind of communal type considerations. So we need to be able to optimize the resources we have. Vanua Levu, of course, has got enormous potential. One of the things that goes against you is you don't have the population numbers. In fact, many people would argue that Fiji does not necessarily have the population numbers also. We have less than 1 million people. Countries like America have a population base of 200 or 300 million people. You open one chicken express store, you've got many people who come and buy a chicken. Vanua Levu, of course, now with the Nambuwalo Draketi Road opening up, I was just saying to my wife yesterday, I think we should come here for a break for 1 week. That's opening up local tourism. And I know a lot of people I've met at the Suva seawall, some people from Labasa have taken their car down for the weekend to Suva, so they can eat McDonald's and visit some relatives. That's economic movement. So the Patterson guy, his boat gets used, he gets more passengers. The service station here, they put up the fuel. They go to Suva, McDonald's has more sales. And most of the people who work at McDonald's are below the age of 20 or 22. They go and buy an ice cream, the guy selling the ice cream makes money. That's how the economy works, that's how we need to view it. So the opening up of roads is good for economic activity. To the people now in Nambuwalo, we're doing some plans for it to have Nambuwalo set up as a small town. Now when that happens, the people who are the landowners in Nambuwalo will know that there will be some government offices that will be set up. So there's an opportunity for them to build some offices and we can lease it off them. They'll get a regular form of income. These are the kind of things that we are looking at. This is what we call the economic enablers. So one of the things that we have found is that a lot of people from Labasa or Vanua Levu are now living within the Suva-Nosori corridor. As taxi drivers are living in Squatter area or Nandi Lotoka area. So that's one of the challenges of Vanua Levu. A lot of resources, we need more people. We are now, as has been already announced, Samoa is bringing a cable. This is for internet, telephone services. From Samoa, and it's coming between Tabiuni and Savu-Savu, submarine cable, that will land in Batuanga. Batuanga is the landing spot for what they call the Southern Cross Cable. There's a submarine cable all the way from Australia, right up Hawaii to North America. So when you do your internet, you make phone calls, etc., a lot of that uses that submarine cable. The good thing for Fiji was that that submarine cable lands in Fiji and connects onwards to North America. So everybody now who wants to access the Southern Cross Cable wants to bring what they call their pipes to connect and land in Botswana. So So the Samoan one is cheaper for them to bring the cable and land it in Botswana. So we have now seen an opportunity for us. Because it's coming between Kavuni and Savusavu, we are now going to get some funding from World Bank, it's about $45 million, maybe about 6, and connect a pipe out of that pipe to land in Savusavu. So once that lands in Savusavu, Vanuatu will have, higher, faster speeds to access to data, internet services, connectivity, which also can mean for us what we're seeing in the long term. The reason why we're doing this is apart from you can download movies or whatever you do with it, maybe Facebook. But the other thing is, you can have people that may want to come and set up call centers in Vanuatu. Maybe able to set up data centers in Vanuatu. This is long term. I'm not saying it'll happen immediately. But you of course need the numbers. You need people who have a certain level of education. The Commissioner of Northern then can use those services to be able to give information to farmers. So the cost of internet becomes cheaper. These are the kind of things we are looking at. So we need to put in place these enablers. We need to put in place these, what we call these routers, whether it's roads, whether it's electricity, whether it's internet services, to open up the potential to any place. So, ladies and gentlemen, that's very briefly what I would like to mention by way of introduction. Please feel free to ask me your questions. Once we finish the question session, the PS will tell you how you can break out into the groups. We have about 5 thematic areas. Please feel to move around and make your contributions. We had some very useful suggestions, right, from people who said that, they wanted the age of heavy machinery to be increased. Because as you know, there's a restriction. For heavy machinery, it cannot be more than 8 years. But on the other hand, of course, we have issues such as we don't want to bring in very old vehicles that have very high carbon emissions. We have given an undertaking to reduce carbon emissions. So how do we manage all of that? If you go to Suva now at the moment, one of the practical issues is traffic jam. Honorable Bulita will tell you, it's like going to Sydney. Anywhere between 4:30 p.m. to 6 p.m., it can take you about 45 minutes just to travel within the city area. So there's that issue. We want more people to have access to their own cars if they want to, if they can afford to. But on the other hand, should we be encouraging people to take public transportation? These are the kind of issues that we need to think about and how we can encourage. We also ask you to, when you look at these issues, that please try and also think on a national basis too, and how we can contribute nationally to Fiji as individuals, as businesses, and of course Vanuatu as a region. So thank you very much for that. There's a lot more I can say, but I'll restrict myself and open up the floor for any questions that you may have. And please feel free to ask anything. Thank you.